Shopify's point-of-sale system helps you sell at every stage of your business. Need a fast and secure way to take payments in person? We've got you covered. How about card readers you can rely on anywhere you sell?
Thanks. Have a good one.
Yep, that too. Want one place to manage all your online and in-person sales? That's kind of our thing. Wherever you sell, businesses that grow with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 a month trial at shopify.com/listen. Shopify.com/listen.
I'm Indy Neidell.
And I'm Burns.
And this is the Baseball History Time Machine.
The best way to kill a half an hour every Sunday.
Yeah, okay, but I don't think that's going to be our official slogan. But yes, it is.
What awesomeness are we going to be talking about today, Indy?
Today I'm going to expand and expound on something I posted in a baseball forum a few years ago about shutouts.
Something you don't actually see a whole lot of anymore.
You do not. In fact, one shutout was enough to lead the major leagues last year, 2024. But there were 16 people tied as leader.
16?
And 19 people were tied with one each in 2018.
Okay, when was the last time there was a substantial number of shutouts in a season?
It depends what you mean by substantial, but King Felix Hernandez had 5 in 2012, Cliff Lee had 6 in 2011, though you still had several seasons in the 1990s when 3 was a league-leading total.
Okay, but hang on. What were the shutouts that you posted about in the forum? I'm guessing it wasn't recent baseball history, right?
What would ever make you think that? No, it was not about recent baseball history. What I had done was go back through baseball history and figure out which pitchers in which single seasons had the greatest percentages of their starts that year be shutouts. And it was a cool exercise that I am now going to share with the whole world.
Because the whole world listens to this podcast.
They should, Burns. They should. I first, using a minimum of 20 starts, discovered there are 11 pitchers who had more than 30% of their starts in a season be shutouts. I'm only going to be talking about post-1900 pitchers for now.
Why? You love talking about 19th century baseball, don't you?
I do, but I'll talk about that at the end. You'll see why later.
Okay.
The post-1900 pitcher with the highest single-season shutout percentage is...
let me guess. I'll have Bob Gibson in 1968.
You are, in fact, correct. He started 34 games and threw 13 shutouts for a 38.2 shutout percentage. There is only one other pitcher above 35% for a season, and that is Grover Alexander with 16 shutouts in 45 starts in 1916 for 35.5%.
Dode.
Old Pete.
Alex the Great.
I love him. There are 9 more seasons over 30%. Jack Coombs, who set the American League record with 13 shutouts for the A's in 1910, did it in 38 starts, 34.2%. There is Harry Krause, who had a 33.3 shutout percentage for the A's the year earlier.
Back up. Who's Harry Krause?
Someone you did not want to hit against in 1909.
Fair enough.
He led the AL with a 1.39 ERA. He appeared in 32 games, but started 21 of them and threw 7 shutouts, 1 out of 3. Dode Alexander is again in the top 5 with another 33.3% mark when he threw 9 shutouts in 27 starts for the 1919 Cubs.
Only 27 start, but wasn't he like a workhorse who always had 35, 40 starts?
That
right?
is true until the 20s. But remember, this was 1919. People were just coming back from World War I. That season was only 140 games long, too. And Alex missed the first few weeks, and after being away at war, it took him more than a month to find his groove. In fact, he was 0-4 with a 4.24 ERA at the end of May.
How did he end up finishing?
16-11 with a league-leading 1.72 ERA. Now here's something to ponder. He won 3 straight Triple Crowns, 1915, 16, and 17, with over 30 wins and over 40 starts each season. Then only 3 starts in 1918 because of going to fight the war. And then only 27 in 1919, and then a final Triple Crown in 1920 with 27 wins. He finished his career with 373 wins, so he quite likely would have had over 400 if not for the war.
Yeah, that dude's pretty underrated, I would say.
Yeah, it's something you don't think of, too, because, it's the National League record for victories, too, what he has. So that's the top 5. Here are the other 6 over 30%. Ed Walsh, 1906, 31 starts, 10 shutouts, 32.3%. Fernando Valenzuela, 1981, 25 starts, 8 shutouts, 32%. Dean Chance, 1964, another forgotten hero, 35 starts, 11 shutouts, 31.4%. Chief Bender, 1914, 23 starts, 7 shutouts, 30.4%. Carl Hubble, 1933, 33 starts, 10 shutouts. And finally, Walter Johnson in 1913 had 36 starts and 11 shutouts. That was a 30.1%.
Isn't Walter Johnson the career leader in shutouts?
He is with 110.
Where's Alexander then?
He is second all-time with 90. Hang on, I have some honorable mentions here.
How are they honorable mentions?
Guys with a 30 or higher shutout percentage, but with fewer than 20 starts, but also at least 4 shutouts. So if you had 2 starts and 1 shutout, I didn't give you credit for 50%.
That's fair.
Okay, this is in increasing order. In 1972, Luis Tiant had a great comeback season, leading the AL with a 1.91 ERA. He did a lot of relief work that year, but he did throw 6 shutouts in 19 starts, 31.5%. And also in 1972, Roger Nelson did exactly the same. 6 shutouts in 19 starts for the Royals.
Roger Nelson, I've never heard that name.
You know what? Neither had I when I made this list.
Well, 10 points to Roger Nelson.
Sure, 10 points to Roger Nelson. Roger, if you're out there, we love you. I don't know if he's alive or not. I might edit that out.
You might have to.
Okay. Now, Chief Bender is both on the list and also an honorable mention with 4 shutouts and 10 starts in 1917 for 40%.
40% is crazy. Is that the most ever?
Not quite. Art Neff in 1915 with the Giants had the same mark as Bender, 4 shutouts and 10 starts. But here's the final honorable mention. In 1941 with the White Sox, Johnny Humphreys started but 6 games and threw 4 shutouts. That is a 66.6 shutout percentage.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
It really is. But you'll see, though, that the main list is all dead ball era with a couple of 60s guys in there, as you'd expect. But the 2 outliers are Hubble and Valenzuela. Okay. You do not expect 10 shutouts in a season in the hitter-friendly 1930s. And Fernando Mania, and, 1981 was the strike season, too. I remember Fernando Mania very well. It was part of popular culture. Like, you'd say to someone, hey man, can you toss me those keys? And when they threw them way over your head or something, you'd go, nice throw, Fernando. And I guess if you said that now, the kids just wouldn't understand.
No, they wouldn't get it. Nice throw, Fernando.
Nice throw, Fernando.
I got to start spreading the gospel, man.
So
it's
I
back.
like that. Nice throw, Fernando.
We're bringing it back.
Okay, we're bringing it back. Good call. And considering he's one of only 11 guys since 1900 with 20 or more starts in a season to have more than 30% of them be shutouts, and one of only 3 since World War II, the hype is, it's pretty real.
And rest in peace. He died recently.
He did. I remember talking to my mom about that. That was really sad. Sleep well, Fernando. I also did the list of the other 36 pitchers who've had seasons where more than 25%, a quarter, of their starts have been shutouts.
And you're going to go down that now?
That I am, but I'm going to do it chronologically and not quite as detailed as the other one. I will also point out 21 of these 36 seasons are from 1906 to 1918 in the dead ball era. 7 from 1963 to 1972, the other dead ball era. 0 are from the interwar live ball period, so 10 points to Carl Hubble for 30% in 1933.
You can see why they called him the meal ticket.
You're not going to believe who the last guy to have a 25% shutout season was, but I'll get there soon enough. There were 5, count them, 5 guys in 1906 who had between 25 and 30% of their starts as shutouts. There was the Pirates' Lefty Liefeld, Cleveland's Addie Joss, and then there were 3 pitchers from Chicago, 2 from the Cubs and 1 from the White Sox, who met each other that year in the World Series.
Who were the pitchers?
Big Ed Rulebach and Three Finger Brown for the Cubs, and Doc White for the Sox. Rulebach gave up just 5.3 hits per 9 innings in 1906, which was the record until Luis Tiant topped it in 1968. It has been topped a few times since then. But still, Rulebach's first 5 years were really amazing. And I'll cover them one day when I get more into forgotten dead ball heroes. Three Finger Brown is anything but forgotten.
Who could forget Three Finger Brown?
Mordecai Peter Centennial Brown.
Wait, one of his names was Centennial?
He was born in 1876. And in 1906, he threw 9 shutouts in his 32 starts and went 26-6. But get this, his ERA was 1.04, beginning a run of 5 straight seasons with an ERA below 2.
Whoa, 104 is insane.
That is what we accept today as the lowest National League ERA of the 20th century. I'll refer everyone to episode 2 for details of Ferdy Schupp and issues around what's official ERA and what isn't.
All right. And the White Sox guy, was it Doc White?
Yeah. He led the AL with a 152 ERA that year, in addition to his 7 shutouts and 24 starts. He was the real deal. And hey, fun fact, when Don Drysdale threw his 5th straight shutout in 1968, en route to throwing a record 6 straight, in the clubhouse after the game, with all the reporters around, a telegram came for Drysdale from Silver Spring, Maryland. This is what it said. Congratulations on winning your 5th straight shutout and equaling my record. I will be rooting for you to break it. It will be a great satisfaction to me to have someone who is a credit to the game break my record. It was signed G. Harris Doc White, who threw 5 straight shutouts in 1904, 64 years earlier.
That's awesome. How old was White in 1968?
He was 89 at the time, but he died in February 1970 before he turned 90.
So cool that he got to see someone break his record. Why was he called Doc, though?
He had a dental practice in the off-season. He was an actual dentist. He was a doc, so that's why they call him Doc.
And he didn't make the list the year he threw 5 straight shutouts.
That was in 1904, so no, not until 1906. And you want to hear another good story involving Doc White?
Silly question, Indy. Of course I do.
Sidetrack accepted. Now, this only tangentially involves Doc White, but you're going to love it because it heavily involves Germany Schaefer.
Wait, he was the guy who stole first base from second, right?
Yeah, we talked about him,
Yeah.
that guy. This story, though, is my favorite Germany Schaefer story. I mentioned it 12 years ago in an episode of my little old YouTube channel, Watch Sunday Baseball, before I got, famous on YouTube with the Great War in World War II. It was from an episode about called shots.
Like Babe Ruth calling his shot in the 1932 World Series.
Just like that, except whether or not that is true, either way, this is still more impressive.
Well, out Babe Ruthing Babe Ruth has got to be a good story, right?
Schaefer spent a few years with the Tigers and was with the pennant-winning squads in 1907 and 1908, right? Ty Cobb breaking out and all. And Davy Jones played outfield. And though Davy Jones did not hit a called homer, he did tell us about this one. In the book, or especially the audiobook, The Glory of Our Times, which is actually the greatest thing ever made in the history of the world and space and time. And I'm not kidding. It's recorded interviews from the early 1960s with old players from way back when, like Jones and like Sam Crawford. And if you have any interest in baseball history, you should get the audiobook of The Glory of Our Times.
I'm guessing that's my homework.
That is everyone's homework. You will all thank me. So Jones tells this story. In 1906, the year Doc White made this shutout list, Schaefer was sitting on the bench one day while Red Donahue was dueling with White and the White Sox. It's 2-1 to the Sox with 2 out and 1 man on in the 9th inning when Tigers manager Huey Jennings decides to pinch hit for Donahue. So he sends Schaefer in to face White. Now, let's be clear. While Schaefer had some decent years as a hitter, earlier in his career, he was average at best. In 1906, he hit all of .238 for the season. But Schaefer walks out onto the field, takes off his cap, and turns to the crowd and says, "You are now looking at Herman Schaefer, better known as Herman the Great, the greatest pinch hitter in the world. I'm going to go up there and hit the ball into the left field bleachers and win this ball game. Thank you." And he did. He put White's second pitch over the fence, ran as hard as he could around the bases, and slid into first, slid into second, slid into third, and slid into home. And when he slid into home, he belted out, "Schaefer wins by a nose." He then took off his cap, turned to the crowd, and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention."
Why don't we have characters like that today?
That is one hell of a called shot any way you slice it. But here is what makes it better than Babe Ruth's, other than being, funnier and
Yeah,
cooler.
all right.
Babe Ruth hit 714 regular season homers and 15 more in the postseason. You expect that from him. Germany Schaefer hit a grand total of 9 career homers. Now, this happened in June 1906, and Schaefer retired in 1918. And while he did hit 6 more career homers after this, all of those were inside the park, meaning that Germany Schaefer's called home run was also the last ball he hit over the fence in his entire career.
When I grow up, Dad, I want to be like Germany Schaefer.
I want to be Germany Schaefer.
Yeah, exactly.
You could do a lot worse. But let me get back to the shutout list.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a great sidetrack.
Okay. In 1907, 8, and 9, there were 2, 2, and 3 guys who made the 25% shutout mark. That includes Addy Joss, again in 1908, Jack Coombs in 1909, a year before his 34% season, Ed Walsh, who was also once on the 30s list, Three Finger Brown again, and 2 other guys, both Cubs, Carl Lundgren once, and Orville Overall twice.
Go Cubs! I mean, we could really kind of use those guys this year, especially with, great names like Orville Overall.
Burns, anybody could use those guys any year, and yeah, especially with names like Orville Overall.
Okay, but what's his real name?
Now, that was his real name, Orville Overall, and he had no middle name. Overall had a short career. He only had 6 full seasons, but he made it count, leading the league in shutouts in 1907 and 1909, and making the 25% list both times. He was actually the Cubs' opening day starter every year from 1907 to 1910, though he did pitch against the Cubs on opening day 1906 when he was still with Cincinnati, so like 5 years in a row.
You'd think that Brown would have been the opening day starter.
You think so, because Brown's like when you think of you think of Three Finger Brown, but well, you'd be wrong.
So that's what, 12 guys in 4 seasons on the list. Does that continue like that? Or?
Not quite so much. There are 9 guys from 1910 to 1918 that had 25 to 30%, including Alexander twice more, Christy Mathewson and Walter Johnson once each, Smokey Joe Wood, Stan Kovaleski, guys you might sort of guess if you had to, but also Fred Toney, who would win the double no-hit game against Hippo Vaughn, made the list.
The double no-hit game?
Yeah, you know the double no-hit game?
I've heard of it, but I don't really know what the details are, so to speak.
Fred Toney and Hippo Vaughn were stars. You have to know that. Toney did the 25% shutout percentage thing his first year as a regular. He was with the Reds and went 17-6, 158, with 6 shutouts in 23 starts. This was the start of a 7-year run for him as a real top-notch pitcher. Hippo Vaughn was even better. His 7-year run as pretty much the best lefty in the National League, with 5 20-win seasons, while it might not be like Koufax, Spawn, or Hubblegood, is not that far away from that neighborhood as a lefty starter. And he was the second best pitcher in the National League after Alexander during Alex's peak.
And he and Toney locked horns?
That they did, on May 2nd, 1917. 2 of the top pitchers in the National League that year. In front of only like 2,500 people, because it was early May cold. In the first inning with 2 outs, Greasy Neal hit a long drive to center, but Cy Williams caught it. I mention that because it was the only ball Cincinnati hit out of the infield the next 9 innings.
Okay, what about the Cubs, though?
In the second, they had a walk and a ground out that advanced the runner. But that was the only time the whole game a Cub reached second base. Now, I have to say, I first read this story when I was a kid in Strange But True Baseball Stories by Furman Bisher, which if anyone out there has a baseball-interested 10 to 13-year-old, is a really good book, and you can find it used online. I still read it sometimes. Great stuff. Anyhow, neither of the pitchers, as they said themselves later, really noticed they were throwing no-hitters until the 8th inning, but both of them kept setting down the opposing sides as 9 innings ended, and neither team had managed a hit off of either pitcher. That ended in the top of the 10th, when, with 1 out, Larry Kopp whacked a single off of Vaughn. Neal flied out for the second out, but then Hal Chase hit a liner that was misplayed and stole second. So there were runners on second and third with 2 outs. Jim Thorpe then topped a roller to third, which Vaughn fielded, but this is an Olympic gold medalist. The guy voted greatest American athlete the first half of the 20th century. This guy is the fastest man in the United States.
That Jim Thorpe. Okay,
Yeah.
we get all the stars in this game.
We
clearly.
do. Vaughn tried for the play at the plate since he didn't think he could catch Thorpe at first, but it was too late, and the top of the inning ended with the Cubs down 1-0.
Come on, Chicago.
Toney struck out Larry Doyle, and then Fred Merkle.
Fred Merkle from the 1908 thingy. Who's not in this game? Hal Chase, Jim Thorpe, Fred Merkle. Who's the president then?
Woodrow Wilson.
Ah, so he's playing for Cincinnati or Chicago?
Yeah. Okay, well, Woodrow Wilson was not there, right? But Merkle smashed what looked to be a homer to the left field seats. But Cuban Manuel Cueto, following in Armando Marsan's footsteps, if you caught the Breaking the Color Barrier Part 1 episode, made an amazing catch at the wall, and slugger Cy Williams struck out to end the inning and preserve the 10-inning no-hitter, the double no-hit victory for Fred Toney.
Yeah, that's one hell of a game.
It's all-time legendary, and hey, side note, Fred Toney did time in the middle of his career, while still a star, for violating the Mann Act, transporting a woman across the state lines for immoral purposes.
Excuse me?
Yeah, but that's a story for another day.
No. That's very much a story for this day.
I still have a lot to cover today. Okay, I'll tell you what. I have a Dead Ball era weirdness episode prepared, and we can do this one of the next couple times, and it will cover Fred Toney and the Mann Act.
That's the name of your next band.
Fred Toney and the Mann Act. It sounds like it'd be like some kind of a blues outfit, doesn't it? Yeah. There is still one more guy from the Dead Ball era on the list I have not mentioned. Al Mamou, who in 1915 made 30 starts for Pittsburgh and threw 8 shutouts for 26.6%.
Al Mamou. How do you even spell that?
Mamaux.
So what can you tell me about Al Mamou?
He threw 8 shutouts and 30 starts for Pittsburgh in 1915. No, I really can't say much
Is
more.
that it? Is that it?
Okay, a little more. He was 21-8 that year with a 2.04 ERA, and he was above average workhorse in 1916. And he had a couple decent years later for the Dodgers, but those 2 Pirates years were the only times in, don't quote me on this, but a 12-year career, I think, that he topped 200 innings. But now we jump over the 1920s and 1930s because no one had a quarter of their starts be shutouts then, except old 30% Hubble.
What about the 1940s, though?
There were 2 in the 1940s. Mort Cooper, who in his 1942 MVP season went 22-7 and led the league in wins, also led the league with a 1.78 ERA and threw 10 shutouts in 35 innings for 28.5%. And also Bob Lemon, who in 1948 with the series-winning Indians threw 10 shutouts in 37 starts.
I would have guessed if it were a Bob playing for the Indians, it would have been Bob Feller.
Feller was the Indians' workhorse up until 1948, leading the AL in starts and innings pitched 5 times each. And he did have a season of 10 shutouts, but it was 1946 when he had 42 starts.
All right.
1948 was the last season he led the league in games started, with 38 to Lemon's 37.
So was Bob Lemon a workhorse too?
Oh, yeah. He led the league in innings pitched in 1948, and he would 3 more times the next 5 seasons, and he also led the league in complete games 5 times, but only in even-numbered seasons, 1948, 50, 52, 54, and 56. Like Harry Heilman in batting titles.
What?
Heilman won them in odd-numbered years, 1921, 23, 25, and 27.
All right, is this the beginning of another sidetrack?
No, it is not. It is not. We move on to the 1950s. There are 2 in the 1950s. There is Yankee ace Allie Reynolds, who had been Cleveland's number 2 behind Feller up until 1948, who threw 7 shutouts in 26 starts in 1951, and he is especially interesting because 2 of those were no-hitters. Reynolds became the second major leaguer to throw 2 no-hitters in a season after Johnny Vandermeer and his back-to-back no-hitters in 1938.
We've got to cover him one day.
Oh, we will. Reynolds' second no-hitter, though, was on September 28th, my birthday, and it guaranteed the Yankees at least a tie in a close pennant race against Cleveland.
Who was the other 1950s guy then?
The legendary Bob Porterfield.
The legendary Bob Porterfield?
Bob Porterfield had a 12-year career, and in the middle of it, he had 3 seasons of 200-plus innings for the Senators, the only 200-inning seasons of his career.
Okay, so tell me more about the legendary Bob Porterfield.
He was supposed to be the 4th or 5th starter for the Yankees in the late 40s and 50s when Reynolds was on top. But as Casey Stengel said in 1954, when Porterfield was no longer a Yankee and was an all-star with the Senators, there was always something wrong. Sore arm, sore head, sore back, sore legs. But Porterfield had really bad luck, getting hit badly several times with comebackers on the mound and getting beamed while batting. But the legendary Bob Porterfield is legendary for making his own legends. Porterfield claimed he was his high school star pitcher, but he actually played infield. He said he volunteered for the armed forces before Pearl Harbor, served in the 82nd Airborne, and made 5 combat jumps. Turns out, though, he didn't finish high school until 1942, was drafted in 1943, and served with the 13th Airborne, who never saw combat. A lot of that info comes from his Sabre bio because I happen to not know that much about Bob Porterfield off the top of my head.
Like Al Mamou.
Yes, like Al Mamou, thank you. But there is no question that Bob Porterfield burned up the minor leagues on his way to the Yankees. He was expected to break through in 1949, but he cut his feet on broken glass before the season. In 1950, that beating I mentioned broke his jaw and gave him a concussion. In 1951, Washington bought him, and he became their top pitcher the next couple years after adding a slider to his arsenal. For our purposes today, he is relevant in 1953 with 9 shutouts in 32 starts. He went 22-10, and the Sporting News named him the Pitcher of the Year, but his .335 ERA is the highest ever of any pitcher who threw 9 or more shutouts, though it was still 10th in the American League. As for his overall career, his Sabre bio, written by Warren Corbett, ends with this. Although evidence shows that Porterfield made up significant parts of his life story, his pitching prowess was real. Yankee Stadium, Griffith Stadium, and Fenway Park are dreams away from Bald Knob in southwestern Virginia. Bob Porterfield climbed the mountain and enjoyed the view from the top, if only for a short while.
I think I really like this Bob Porterfield, legendary Bob Porterfield, shall I say. Way to live the dream.
Way to live the dream. And we are on to the 1960s, where we now have 6 25%ers.
The most since the teens.
Yep, and they are the usual suspects. Sandy Koufax twice, Juan Marichal once, Don Drysdale and Luis Tiant in 1968, and you'll know why if you listen to episode 2 about 1968. The wild card here is Jim Palmer, coming off of injury in 1968, has 6 shutouts in 23 starts in 1969.
I don't think I would have expected Palmer to be on this list. I mean, I know he was great, but I don't think of him as a shutout guy.
Well, you'll be surprised because he made the list again in 1975 with 10 shutouts in 38 starts.
Okay, I'm impressed. Who else do we got for the 70s?
We have only 2 more. Don Sutton managed it in 1972 with 9 shutouts and 33 starts, and Louisiana Lightning himself, Ron Guidry, in 1978 with 9 shutouts in 35 starts.
Wait, didn't we once mention that season in an episode?
We did, all the way back in episode 1 about Babe Ruth, because Ruth's 9 shutouts in 40 starts in 1916 set the American League mark for lefties that was tied by Guidry in 1978.
Okay, do we have any in the 80s, or is the list kind of done?
There are 2 in the 80s, other than Fernando being on the 30% list. Mm-hmm. One of the big 3 from 1985 is on the list. That is the year Doc Gooden, John Tudor, and Oral Hershiser had 153, 193, and 203 ERAs.
Which is pretty mental for the 80s. Which one?
I think most people would guess Gooden because his was one of the best pitching seasons in history, but he only had 8 shutouts in 35 starts. John Tudor had 10 in 36. Oh. Now, I remember that season well because as good as Gooden was, you always kept an eye on Tudor because at the end of May, he was 1-7 with no shutouts and a .374 ERA, and then he went 20-1 with 10 shutouts and a 1.37 ERA the next 4 months. It was a crazy fun season to follow the pitching.
Yeah, I bet it was. That's box office stuff.
But there's still one more guy on this list. A guy from 1989. The last guy to do it.
And who would that be?
It would be, and it is, Tim Belcher.
No way.
It's true. Tim Belcher was 15-12 for the season, but in 30 starts, he threw 8 shutouts.
I'm impressed. In 1989?
Yep.
Well, I guess that's it for today.
It is not. I haven't told you why this is just post-1900.
Yeah, why is that?
Well, partly because there's only one guy from before 1900 who makes the list, but also star pitchers were starting 40, 50, or 60 games a year. And with that workload, you can't bear down all game long unless you have to. And of course, with the lack of or with primitive gloves, there were an awful lot of errors and unearned runs.
So who's the one guy that did it?
The one guy that did it is Ben Sanders, who did it with Philadelphia his rookie year of 1888 when he had 8 shutouts in 29 starts. Now, he actually managed to play for 3 Philadelphia teams in 3 straight years in 3 different major leagues. The Phillies in the National League, the Quakers in the Players League, and the Athletics in the American Association. Considering he had only a 5-year career, I think that's pretty cool. And his final season in 1892 was with Louisville, and though he did not pitch very well for them, he was a good enough hitter to play some first base and some outfield. And he led the team in hitting. And that team included Fritz Pfeffer and Hall of Famer Huey Jennings, who would go on to hit .401 just 4 years later.
That's a pretty good claim to fame.
and it is a pretty good time to end this episode, which I believe mentions more players than any other so far. If you want to summarize, including both the 25 and 30% lists, Dode Alexander had 4 seasons with over 25% of his starts being shutouts. Ed Walsh, Walter Johnson, Addy Joss, Three Finger Brown, Sandy Koufax, Jim Palmer, and Orville Overall had 2 each. All of those pitched in the dead ball era or the mid-60s pitchers era except Jim Palmer. What that means, you can make of what you will.
But go on our Facebook and YouTube pages and tell us. Or better yet, join us on patreon.com. Just search for Indy Neidell's Baseball History Time Machine and tell us there. And you can get the content ad-free and early if you like.
You can get it as early as I end up editing these episodes. So that is it for today from me, Indy Neidell.
And me, Burns.
And the Baseball History Time Machine.
Are you looking for a new job or want a career change? Look no further than Monster.com. Need a little help standing out? Our expert resume writing services will make sure you shine. Want to brush up on your interview skills? Engage with our AI interview prep tool. Want some advice on negotiating your new salary? Visit our salary tools and extensive library of career advice articles, and you'll have all the tips and tricks you'll need to succeed. Visit Monster.com today and take the first step towards your career. Monster.com. Find your right job fit.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.